Bedard says the Patriots have a plan. It's the trenches, D-line, O-line.
Mm-hmm.
How do we feel about that plan? Is it the right plan? Where would you start with that?
Well, did you ever see the sequel to The Meg? The Meg 2?
I don't think I saw the first Meg.
The Trench.
Okay.
That's
good.
what it was called.
Good.
That worked out pretty well for Jason Statham and everybody involved there. No, it's not certainly glamorous by any means, but after watching the Super Bowl and after watching the Philadelphia Eagles, you got to start somewhere. And they have a million needs. That's why I'm not sure you can completely go wrong. Like, if they added a high-end wide receiver, would you be like, damn, it's not a lineman? No, because they need that too. Or if they added another corner, or if they added even a running back. Not that should be the priority by any stretch, but they have so many spots available. Quarterback, nope, got the quarterback, which is great. They have one really good corner. That's also great to have. After that, I like some of the D linemen. Don't love them, but I like them. I think they'd be better with another really, really good player up there. We mentioned Myles Garrett from a week ago. If you added Myles Garrett to the group of Barmore and Godchow and White, then yeah, I like those guys a lot better. But there are so many different places to go. I don't hate the idea, though, of the guys up front. You saw how dominant Philly was, and it was for both reasons, right? It was them getting after Patrick Mahomes without even having to blitz, so they could leave a bunch of guys in coverage. And then also Jalen Hurts having time to throw and Jalen Hurts having the ability to run because their offensive line was so good. So, yeah, it's not the most exciting. It's probably not a lot of household names for a lot of fans right now, whether it's guys in the draft or even some of the top free agents, but I don't hate it.
So, and again, it might be overreactionary to the Super Bowl, but I think you make a good point. It's not just the Eagles' D-line, which we spend a whole day talking about after the Super Bowl and how dominant they were, and they were. I don't mean to take away from that, but probably what's underscored with the Eagles championship team is their offensive line. I think they have 3 O-linemen that they pay $20+ million to. Lane Johnson, Mailata, and I think Landon Dickerson. I think they all make $20+ million a year. And so they went out and they added Mekhi Becton this past year. They moved him from tackle to guard. So their O-line was great. So you're right. It's not sexy. It's not maybe the most interesting to delve into. It's not as fun to talk about as a wide receiver or a shiny object like that. But their plan to build through the trenches is a sound one. And I'll tell you, Keefe, yesterday I said, well, Josh McDaniels smoking gun on this coaching staff. Who's running the team? Do I have a high confidence level in who's running the team? Well, to answer the second question, you got to answer the first. I'm still worried that Kraft is running things, and I don't trust him. Vrabel, I would trust more. This doesn't sound like a Robert Kraft plan, right? To bring in
that's not what sells
trenches.
Tickets.
No.
That's not what gets people all fired up.
So that's promising.
Because I'm very much the shiny object person. So if you were like, hey, they just signed T. Higgins, I'd be like, wee, season tickets.
Me too.
But
well, I mean, maybe not.
Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah.
No, but
I get his jersey, obviously.
Hey, but long term and hell, even in the short term, maybe the better approach would be to get the guys up front and not the most glamorous by any stretch, but long term could pay the most dividends. And looking at the Eagles' offensive line, to your point, they have there's 2 first-round picks, but one of them wasn't theirs, right? Becton was a first-round pick by the Jets. But I'm just saying how these guys got into the league: 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a 7th. So it's all right, one of them was some kind of good luck, but the rest of it is pretty highly invested players. Right? Lane Johnson was a super high draft pick, and they hit on it. Dickerson was a more recent pick, but that was a second-round pick. Their center to replace Jason Kelce was also a second-round pick. So, I mean, I guess you could look at that one a couple of different ways. They have 2 guys that were drafted in the top 11, right? Becton was the 11th pick in 2020. I don't really want the Patriots using a top 10 pick on a lineman, but
is the need there? I'm sorry, is the value there? Is Will Campbell
in this draft
a tackle? I don't know that he is.
Yeah, maybe not.
And so do you move down to get him? Do you wait to get him? I know Doug Hyde in the Herald today with his mock draft was making the case you can get a franchise left tackle in the second round. I don't know. I mean,
so I don't know that either.
Patriots did it with Matt Light. I'm not saying it's impossible to do, but I think that's a tougher needle to thread. So the way I would answer this, if you're going to go all in and build through the trenches, get your hog mollies, your big uglies, your Haas's, that's your plan. I think the better route to do that is free agency. And I think the way I would phrase it is the top free agent target for me is not T. Higgins. And I would love them to get T. Higgins, But I think there's a lot of options at wide receiver. We've talked about them. You could trade for DK Metcalf, Kupp, Samuel. There are receivers in the draft, not that this organization has a good track record of that. So I think the number one free agent target for me is Ronnie Stanley. And getting a blindside left tackle who has had injury issues, but he's been a high-level player for a talented and successful organization, I think that's where I'd start. That would be the ideal fit this offseason if the Patriots are going to make a big splash, drop some dough. T. Higgins, I'd be very excited about. I like a shiny object, too.
Yeah, get the jersey. You're more likely to get the T. Higgins jersey than the Ronnie Stanley jersey.
But if they don't get Ronnie Stanley, then I'm starting to wonder, well, where is your franchise left tackle coming from? Is it the draft? I'm not sure. Is it another free agent? I'm not. I feel like that's, if you're talking about scarcity at a position, that's the one I want to go capitalize on.
Yeah, I'm torn on the draft just because I don't want one in the first round. I want one probably in the second round, but then you're saying, well, if there's nobody really liking the first round, what are the chances of somebody really liking the second round? And we've seen it work both in their advantage and not in their advantage. The Patriots drafted Joe Thuney and Shaq Mason not in the first round. Mm-hmm. And those guys at a time were two of the best guards in the NFL.
Guards,
yeah, no, you don't want Thuney playing left tackle, but they're two of the best guards, but still like solidifying your offensive line. Like I would say Dickerson and Becton pretty good for the Eagles. So there is an avenue there, but then there's also the two guys you took last year. Like you kind of took that similar approach. Right? Like the two guys you drafted a year ago, and maybe you were going to play one of them out of position or whatever. But those guys you could have looked at and you're like, all right, that's similar draft capital to Thuney and Mason. So it's all about finding those guys and then sort of developing them. The problem is if you try to fill too many of those spots in free agency, just because the nature of free agency, it's going to chew up a ton of the money, a ton of your resources that you have. So do you fill up on offensive line, and then what do some of the other groups look like? Whereas if you at least get a cost-controlled guy in the draft, now hopefully he's plug and play, right? Hopefully he's better than Cole Strange is.
Hopefully he's this year's Joe Alt, right? Joe Alt
you put him in there and he plays.
A lot of people said last year if you didn't want the quarterback, I think you were wrong. And if you didn't want the wide receiver, a lot of people wanted Neighbors or Marvin Harrison or whatever. There was a school of thought that go get your franchise tackle in Joe Alt, who missed a stretch of time as a rookie with the Chargers, but was really good.
Yeah.
Maybe you get that guy, whether it's Campbell. I think there's a real chance Simmons out of Ohio State, who's rocketing up mock drafts. I think there's a real chance he's the first tackle taken. Banks out of Texas has dropped a little bit. But if you get your equivalent there, right, hopefully that's the best case scenario. Plug and play. You have a cheap, controllable left tackle to protect Drake May's blindside for the next, 5, 6, 10 years, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, just looking back on it, Wallace and Robinson were both drafted in higher spots than Thuney and Mason. So it is such a crapshoot, but it's also now. This is the other thing. Like last year's draft, I liked after the second after the draft. Then the season played out. I didn't like it so much, but
I like their draft last year too.
Their offense was so bad, and then it was the first year without Bill. You're like, what are they going to do?
Wide receiver, tackle. I like that too. Turns out 2/3 of the guys can't play.
And they continue that. They went QB wide out, lineman, wide out. Defensive back, the one defensive player, then quarterback, who they may have two quarterbacks, which on tight end.
Which I did like that pick too.
So, but like they got to play. Like you got to hit on the picks. And Bill Belichick did it for so long that there's a million examples on both sides. You could point if you think he's a great drafter, you point to these 10. If you think he's a horrible drafter, you point to these 10. With Elliott Wolf, it's the 1 year, and you're like, I don't want that. And then with Mike Vrabel, you're like, I'm not really sure, like what exactly his calls were in Tennessee, what weren't his calls, and things like that. So I think we're kind of entering into year 2 post Bill, but with not a lot of real clarity. Like we don't know how good he is as a drafter. He could have an awesome draft. He could stumble into it and it'd be like, oh, this guy, I wish he was here last year. Or it could look like this past season.
No, it could. And so Bedard says the plan he's hearing from the Patriots, they're building along the trenches. So is that the right approach? Do you agree with that approach? Do you think that's the right way to build the Patriots this offseason? You can jump in. 617-779-7937. I mentioned, Keefe, my top free agent target is Ronnie Stanley. Who would yours be in free agency? Do you have a name above all else?
Well, T. Higgins.
That is yours.
Yeah, T. Higgins. And I don't mind the trench approach. I don't. And I'm probably more open to if push comes to shove and the draft board doesn't fall the way that you want it to, meaning like Hunter and Carter go, I would take Will Campbell over you. Like, I think if that's what you're sort of left with, and even if you're trading down, like maybe the next best hoss available in the first round, I'd be willing to do that. I still think it's the receiver because some of these trade options that I like, whether it's Cooper Kupp or somebody else, we highlighted yesterday, I want them kind of paired with somebody. So I think I would still go strongly after T. Higgins, at least in the free agent market.
So let's play this out. You mentioned if Campbell's the guy that Carter's gone.
Yeah.
Hunter's gone.
Yeah.
And now you're choosing between like Campbell or a name we just got on the text line, Mason Graham, 617-779-7937. Guys, you think he's worth the number 4 pick? I don't really think a D tackle is worth the number 4 pick. I don't think an offensive lineman who may not be an offensive tackle and might be a guard is worth the number 4 pick. So you could trade down, but my advice in that scenario is if that's really what it's shaping up, you got your intel, and I don't know how much intel Vrabel and Cowden are going to get. Doesn't seem like Wolf and Kraft were getting much a year ago. The intel you're getting is that those 2 players are going to be gone. The quarterbacks might be dropping. You're choosing between the Will Campbells and Mason Grahams of the world. I'd like to see him move the 4th pick and build through the trenches that way, which is Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, etc. Yes.
Chris Shine mock draft 1.0 came out today.
I did see that. Who does he have him taking?
Mason Graham. So I brought it up. He's got Mason Graham, but he is one of these guys that says it won't be quarterback 1-2. It'll in fact be Carter Hunter 1-2. So he pushes the quarterbacks down. He has Cam Ward going 3, then Mason Graham going 4. Something to follow.
How would you feel about that?
No, not great.
Yeah, me either.
Because I actually don't think they're
that's building through the trenches. That's sticking to their quote unquote plan. But I wouldn't feel good about taking a D tackle at 4.
And I know they got carved up on the run a lot last year, but just based on the personnel, isn't their D line better than their O line right now? Like I feel better about the D line than the O line, and maybe it's wishful thinking, but I don't know, one of those pass rushers that's out there, or there's a lot of heat or smoke around Jeffrey Simmons that Vrabel had in Tennessee. Do you want a big hoss on the D line? Like maybe they trade for him.
Him and Drake were friendly at the Pro Bowl apparently.
So that could be a guy they bring in. I'd much rather that kind of trade, somebody that's played for Vrabel, is sort of on his same page, and is really good, than using the 4th overall pick on a D tackle.